Recording in you know, West End, East End, one of those ends. I'll find it.
Oh. The library?
Yeah.
Library. That can be an education.
I said, good to see you.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, just more to say.
I think we're good. That looks all right.
I think so.
Maybe I could get a little more.
Yeah. I mean, I think so.
It's fine.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Is everything, any chairs or anything?
I don't think so.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah,
Take it, I see you.
they're all the same pattern.
Like situation. Yeah, see, you know, like this is, the stocks.
If you want to look at some of the items.
Actually. I like it. It is. And I'm kind of.
Yeah.
Not exactly.
Okay.
Are you? I actually go like that.
So that is that's the Adjunct Press. That's at the house.
Is it?
Yeah, yeah.
Have we posted for last? Right.
I'm sure they need.
This was, that was one, we looked, there was one before.
Oh, yeah.
Kelmscott Press.
That's it, yeah. And that's the car. There's the like front room.
They have all the prints.
Yeah.
Was there? Yeah.
Yeah. Like stuff. You know.
That's what he was doing when he was at Red House. You
Yeah.
know, that's what people remembered for. I was mentioning. It's fine. Oh.
Especially, yeah. No one. Right. So
You guys are few important. Okay, I mean, the book nerds. Yeah.
If you have this,
Up here. Anybody can present.
see it, right, it's Rebecca.
Yeah. Nice, I mean, you know, it's just Charles.
Yeah.
Pretty nice. Yeah, we heard the flashy. But they were going to. Yeah, I read about that. I didn't see that. We told me that. Yeah. Oh, no. No, now there are these songs. It's switch went from.
Yeah.
That's not how. And again, our daily page is what we could direct them. And I have to pay for that, I know. And I'm that, right. They got there for a couple years.
This is good.
Careful, Dave, we asked.
I just saw that.
I didn't know.
See, no, I we haven't seen.
Oh, yeah.
All they do is,
Yeah, it could be a 10-year place.
some of these are on Sunday. So you should go to those. This is what I go to the art.
Bill, where it was on. Like a 10-year. But it was. Like 10 years.
Yes, right, like, yeah.
Actually,
I think we're.
Yeah, but-
It's actually great, like, we struck there, like we did yesterday.
Yeah.
If we got it, that can, let's do this first row chairs, it would be perfect. It's still okay, like it's in that first line, you're still. You get a bit. No one worries.
How we change the.
How do we advance the slides?
Is it where we-
Yes, got you. I guess.
You have to do all right. If we're not starting for a couple minutes, first. We have a clicker. The clicker.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like three.
yes, of course.
The traffic up here is a.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
No, thank you, appreciate that. Good question. Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Otherwise. We can't go quicker.
They also advance it. No, that's this.
I just do that next slide.
No.
That would be great. I mean, I'd like to be able to see it.
I don't know if I have long enough to still get the projector.
That's all right.
I know I have this.
Thank you.
What are we doing? Yeah. It's like,
Schedule this in December.
right. I didn't think about it. First graduation.
Well, yeah, 'cause I just think like, oh, we're done with the semester.
Yeah,
Let's just be over it now, like what comes after that?
Also, that, like, Grandma, doing her class, or she comes to remember to come. I know she'll be up to these.
She's graduating.
She's graduating.
She's a real nice, she was my son.
Mhm.
Yeah, great, great.
She's
Really just saying.
like, I wish we had a. Do this.
Yes. Should be, sounds good.
She's found here. You said.
Yeah.
That.
I think that's for however long she wants to do.
For those of you who are here on time and are ready, we're just gonna wait a few more minutes. We are waiting for some AV support. So I would appreciate your patience.
You know, the traffic out there is fine.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing us. Right. You might be able to do some.
It sounds.
Oh, that's.
Yeah.
Like, where's it from? But I'll back.
Yeah. Like I know that.
Once I found it.
She will respond, but then she just not even look at.
Yeah.
Um,
There's so many people that these talks. And.
Yeah.
Especially during. What's called. Every passenger board, actually, videos and chats. Is Tuesday. Just sitting.
Try that.
But it's just. Did you hear? For some of that stuff, it's too late.
You know. Right.
That's gonna take you forward, that's gonna take you backward, and then if you're a pointer person.
No, my laser pointer. Think it works, you have to check it out.
I did, but you can check again.
Thank you. No problem.
We can, like, maybe.
Great.
I think we're good, I had to start the live stream already, so.
Hello, I don't know that I need this very loud, as some of you can attest to. Welcome, thank you all for joining us today on this most beautiful day in Milwaukee. We really appreciate you being here. Thank you to those of you who are live streaming with us. We're very happy to have you attending as well, that although you maybe weren't able to make it here in person. So I'll introduce myself quickly. My name is Rebecca Doherty. I am the manager of the Rare Books Department here at Milwaukee Public Library. I'll just tell you a quick few housekeeping things, and then my colleague Sarah Finn will introduce our lecturer today. So a bit about the Rare Books Room, if you have or have not visited before, we are typically open for programs like that you're here for today and by appointment. If you would like to make an appointment to see anything that we have in our collection behind the glass here, please email us at mplarchives@milwaukee.gov. You can do that. You can make an appointment with us Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. We just ask for 48 hours advance notice. If you can't remember that email address, no worries. We have our cards out on the table along with some other things for you to take on your way out after you fill out your evaluation forms. If you need to use the restroom at all, if you're unfamiliar with the building, if you go around the gallery, around the stairs here, head north, take a left, you'll see them on your left-hand side that way. I just want to give you a bit of information about a few programs we have upcoming in the Rare Books department. June 8th, Saturday, June 8th. The entire central library is being activated for the summer reading program kickoff. And we in the Rare Books department will be involved with that as well. We'll have an open drop-in type program. Some of you are familiar. We've been doing those the last few months with some materials curated from our rarities children's collections that we have here. So please join us for that. There's a flyer out there. Follow us on social media, sign up for our email list. You'll be informed about that as well. Then Sunday, June 23rd, we are partnering with Cordy Fest. So we're going to have a speaker here in this space, Professor Jason Puskar, who's working with mapping the Cordyverse, the Cordy keyboard. That's what that's all about. So that'll be the afternoon of Sunday, June 23rd. Oosh, I'm forgetting the date now. It is a Friday, July 19th. Central Library is also going to be activated after hours that evening for a Braver Angels RNC event. This rare book space will be open for that. We'll have a display, a different display behind the glass, a different display in the exterior exhibit windows. So please come for that. And we'll have more things going on too. Oh, Art Book Club, of course, for those of you who are familiar with Art Book Club, it's going to be back in the art room starting.
The next one will be June 4th from 5 to 7, which is a Tuesday. We have a flyer that has the next 4 dates.
So the next one is June 4th for those of us who are with us live streaming. That is Tuesday night. That one's different, switching it up. So yes, please follow us on social media if you don't already. Sign up for our email list. Check us out online, and we hope to see you again all soon. So I don't think I've forgotten anything. If you have any questions, please do ask us. Some of you already had an opportunity, if you're here in person, to have looked at some of the items that Sarah curated that are in conjunction with the lecture today. You'll have time after the lecture as well to look at some more of those. And now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah Finn.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Finn. I'm a librarian in the Rare Books and Special Collections Departments of Milwaukee Public Library. It is my honor to introduce Max Yela, who will be giving a presentation on the legacy of the Fine Press movement. Since 1994, Max Yela has served as the head of special collections at the UWM Libraries, a premier public collection of over 100,000 rare books and special printed materials from the 15th century to present, covering a wide range of subjects. As head of the department, Max curates its holdings and creates programming around them, instructs as many as 100 visiting classes each year, provides research assistance, produces programs and exhibitions, and mentors interns. Additionally, Yela has taught several courses at UWM, including the history of books and printing in the School of Information Studies and Book Arts Survey and Book Arts Concepts in the Department of Art and Design. Max has been active in the Wisconsin arts community for over 20 years and was honored for his contributions in 2017 with the Wisconsin Visual Art Achievement Award. I have known Max since 2017 when I took his History of Books and Printing course. After the semester was over, Max hired me as a student worker in the UWM Special Collections, which was a transformative experience that shaped the type of librarian I strive to be each day, carrying on Max's goal of making public special collections as accessible and useful as possible. Please join me in welcoming Max Yela.
Thanks for that, Sarah. Thank you for inviting me, Rebecca. Yeah. Thank you. Can you all hear me? I can't really tell from here. And thank you all for coming out today on this beautiful sunny day. I mean, right here. Outside. But thank you for being here. And thank you for your kind words, Sarah. Sarah was a wonderful graduate intern for us. And I always believe in, in mentoring or in teaching that, thank you. Yeah, that's fine. I could turn this on. Maybe not. Maybe.
When the lights were on, did you all see in the back? Okay, that's it.
Thank you. It's a lot better without. It is a lot better without. Unfortunately, this is not working, and I have to text her, so I have to go with that. But I wanted to say that, I think if I teach and I mentor, because I want to do that, but I also want to get something back from my students and my mentees, and I've learned so much from you. So thank you very much. And by the way, our book club, it's one of my favorite things to do here is I really encourage you to go to our book club. It's so much fun, it really is, and it's very informal. So my talk today is about the ongoing legacy of the fine press movement. I think that, even if you're not completely familiar with the movement, when we think of the phrase fine press, we probably conjure an image of a deluxe book with fine, possibly handmade paper with untrimmed deckled edges, beautifully printed type, possibly with original prints as illustrations, all bound sumptuously in something elegant, say dyed goatskin leather with gold tooling and stamping. And maybe other things come to mind too, like limited editions, numbered editions, a large format, perhaps signed by the author or the artist or both. And essentially, if you think these things, you'd be correct. That is the fine press tradition in a nutshell. But the fact that you might think these things at all is also a part of the enduring and ongoing legacy of the fine press movement. And I'll be discussing that. However, there is another part of the legacy that is not as well discussed or written about. The profound effect that the movement has had on mainstream printing and publishing. I think it's fairly easy to draw lines of connection between this book. This is an 1896 edition of works of Geoffrey Chaucer, designed by William Morris with original wood engravings by Edward Burne-Jones and printed at Morris's Kelmscott Press in Hammersmith, London London. I already mentioned the date, didn't I? 1996. Comparing that against a book like this, which is a 1982 edition of the Alice in Wonderland, designed by Barry Moser with his own original wood engravings, printed in West Hatfield, Massachusetts, by Harold McGrath at Moser's Pennyroyal Press. But it's probably pretty hard, or maybe a little hard, to see how something like the Kelmscott Chaucer, or even Moser's book, is connected in some ways to, I don't know, say the first printing of J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, which was commercially printed in 2003 for Arthur A. Levine Books, an imprint of Scholastic, one of the top 10 largest publishers in the world, with illustrations by Mary Grandpré. And yet there is a very strong connection between these two. I would even suggest that Harry Potter would not look like this if it were not for the fine press. This too is the enduring legacy of that movement. So to discuss this and how this all came to be, I need to put things into context. In this talk, I will discuss the origins of the contemporary fine press movement, which is essentially an outgrowth of the arts and crafts movement of the late 19th century, and the various precedents for the movement, and finally the legacy of the movement for both fine printing and for commercial publishing. To discuss this in great depth would take an entire semester-long course, which I hope to do one day. But by necessity, I can only offer the broadest outlines. The arts and crafts movement was basically a design reform movement of the late 19th century that was established primarily in England in response to the massive industrialization of myriad craft processes beginning in the earlier part of the century. And at the center of this movement toward the end of the century, which included scores of individuals, was the artist, designer, poet, writer, and socialist William Morris. Morris is popularly remembered for his florid wallpaper designs, among other things. But in the late 1880s, he was inspired by detailed images of 15th century type designs by Nicholas Jensen to design and manufacture his own typefaces, and using the design principles of the movement established the Kelmscott Press in 1891, the first productions rolling off his hand presses in 1892. Morris was an admiring collector of illuminated manuscripts and early printed books, particularly for the beauty of their calligraphy and typography, which he emulated. The book on the left is a breviary from the Morgan Library, which was owned by William Morris. They have quite a bit of his personal library at the Morgan Library in New York City. And the one on the right is a Bible with commentary by Nicholas Delire that we produced in 1481 in Venice, probably in Venice, which this library has, and it's on display in the case up there. As I've already said, he was especially inspired by the work of French typographer and printer Nicholas Jensen, who set up shop in Venice in 1470. Jensen's type design served as the model for Morris's first proprietary typeface, the golden type. And as he states on this page, he says, quote, "This type I studied with much care, getting it photographed to a big scale and drawing it over many times before I began designing my own letter. In fact, my Roman, so that though I think I mastered the essence of it, I did not copy it servilely. In fact, my Roman type, especially in the lowercase, tends rather toward the Gothic than does Jensen's." Morris would go on to design two more proprietary faces more in the Gothic style, the Troy and the Chaucer. A fourth typeface he abandoned, but after his death in 1896, it was revived, redesigned by Emery Walker and C.H. St. John Hornby as Subiaco, one of the proprietary typefaces used by the Adjunct Press. Note that I used the term proprietary. The typeface designed only for the printer's own use. This was something new, and it became a hallmark of the fine press movement, subsequently embraced by commercial designers and design educators in the 20th, 21st century. Yeah, it's something new, but I should say better that it was more of a revival of something old. At the beginning of printing in Europe, the earliest printers had type designers and punch cutters on staff to produce type specifically for their presses. This is proprietary type. This remained the case until about the mid-16th century, when typography and type production became a separate industry with such innovators as Claude Garamond and Guillaume Levet. This state of affairs remained essentially unchanged for the next 350 years. That type was produced outside the print shop for off-the-shelf use, until the revival of the proprietary type with William Morris. The paper from the period of early printing was also handmade, usually from linen rags. This too, Morris emulated, sourcing his handmade paper from Joseph Batchelor in Kent, whose paper remained favorite among fine press printers for the next 50 years. The use of handmade paper rather than commercial wood pulp paper became another hallmark of fine press movement that continues to this day. Now, there had been some attempts at setting up private presses with personal letter design and specially made paper before Morris, particularly with the efforts of John Baskerville and William Blake in the 18th century, but there was no movement that evolved around them. So when they passed, so did their ideas. Morris, however, had an entire community of followers, and foremost amongst them, the principal founders of the modern fine press movement were Emery Walker, kind of the guru and mentor to all the early fine press printers. T.J. Compton Sanderson, who founded Dove's bindery. The bindery was located right next door to the Kelmscott Press house in Hammersmith. And then after the death of William Morris, he founded the Dove's Press with Emery Walker. Edward Burne-Jones, the artist, who almost single-handedly kind of brought wood engraving out of the industrial process that it was from the 19th century into the sphere of artists. C.R. Ashby, who was the head of the School of Handicrafts in London. And after, again, the death of William Morris, he ended up getting all the print equipment from Kelmscott and started the Essex House Press. And I already mentioned C.H. St. John Hornby, who was the founder of the Adjunct Press. And then there was Edward Johnston. Edward Johnston was a calligrapher, a hand letterer, and he single-handedly, these are all single-handedly done things. These are the people who revive things that we do every day, not every day, but in our communities all the time, like founding or designing type and doing calligraphy. So he kind of single-handedly revived calligraphy as an art form in the 20th century, and that continues to this day as well. At least two figures were not officially part of the arts and crafts movement, but rather worked in the Art Nouveau style. Also had an important influence on the emerging private press movement. Charles Ricketts and Lucien Pissarro. Their influence was not as great in the British Isles as it was in America, where many of the stylistic expressions of arts and craft and Art Nouveau would be fused. All these individuals were responding to the perceived degradation and dehumanizing production engendered by a century of mass industrialization of the book and the movement away from hand processes. Everything from paper making to printing, typecasting, print making, book binding, and so on. I love this image because these processes made these laborious hand processes so simple that even women could do it. At the end of the century, it was the aim of many in the arts and crafts movement and some Art Nouveau artists to put craft and design and handiwork back into the craft of bookmaking. The interconnected web of individuals and presses in the early years of fine press activities is almost dizzying. I'm gonna let you sit and absorb this for a minute. It's just, looks like Rube Goldberg invented this design. I mean, there's Emery Walker at the top, kind of like pulling strings for getting William Morris to found the Kelmscott Press. T.J. Compton Sanderson of the Dove's bindery, and he's connected to Johnston, who's teaching all these other people, and it's just one big spiral after another. And all of these people found really important presses. There's this is Kelmscott Press. This is Essex House Press. Ashendene Press. This is the Veiled Press of Charles Ricketts, the Art Nouveau artist. And this is the typographic style that Dove's Press had, this beautiful typeface that is proprietary to the Dove Press. There's a whole story about this press that if you ask me a question later, I'm not saying the story, but it's very long. But it's also, they should make a movie out of it, or at least a TV series. All these individuals I'm sorry, in America, the convoluted connections are just as complicated, if not more so. But there they are. These are the originators of the fine press movement in America. Fred and Bertha Gowdy, Will Ransom, W.A. Dwiggins, who actually coined the phrase graphic design, Dart Hunter, again, single-handedly revived hand paper making in America that we still do today. Fred Langworthy, Clark Conwell and his wife, Helen Marguerite O'Kane, and Wisconsin's own Helen Bruneau Van Vechten. And of course, there's the notorious and shamelessly self-promoting founder of the Roycrofters in New York, Elbert Hubbard, who Morris's daughter May called, quote, that obnoxious imitator of my dear father. The work of their presses is almost as exquisite as those of the English presses, but more in the Art Nouveau, or more with the Art Nouveau bent. This is Elston Press. This is Conwell and O'Kane's press. This is the Blue Sky Press, Langworthy's press in Chicago. The Elston Press is in Rochelle, New York, wasn't Rochelle in New York. This is another Chicago press, the Village Press of Fred Gowdy. And this is Philosopher Press in Wausau, Wisconsin. Is that it here? Oh yeah, this is Saul. Right? So that book is on display for this case. Don't trip over the wires. Yeah. I almost did that myself. By the time of the First World War, many of these presses had folded, especially in England. But after the war, there was a second wave of fine press publishing in England, America, and even on the continent. In England, there were new, longer-lasting fine presses with a more post-war sensibility, founded in the 1920s and 1930s. For example, Golden Cockerel Press. Oh, sorry. Oh, this is a Roycroft book. I left that out. This was a kind of style that May Morris was degrading. It was an imitation of the father and didn't really go to the roots of what her father was trying to do. But this is Golden Cockerel. This is Raven Press, Rigginock Press in Wales, Presser Press, Nonsuch Press, just to name a few. The last two, Presser Press and Nonsuch Press, endeavored to apply fine press principles to commercial press work. Wood engraving, unmoored from its 19th century status as a commercial image-making process, was firmly established as an artist medium in the founding of the Society of Wood Engravers in 1920, many main members of which established their own presses on the arts and crafts model, produced original prints for both fine presses and commercial publishing. Today, the fine press movement is alive and well with dozens of presses. I'm just going to show you three. Whittington Press, Old Style Press. Both of these were produced just 5 years ago. Circle Press is the book from the late 1970s. In America, we had our own second wave. Presses like the Graham Press, the Colt Press, the Limited Editions Club, and the presses of John Henry Nash, Ward Ritchie, and William Edwin Rudge. At the same time, American designers, particularly American book designers, trained in the fine press tradition of the early 20th century, were becoming major international designers for fine press and commercial presses, such as Bruce Rogers, W.A. Dwiggins, Fred Gowdy, Frederick Ward, Will Ransom, Rudolph Ruzicka. In the 1940s and 50s, American artists inspired by the fine press were establishing their own presses. Leonard Baskin, his Gahanna Press, Harry Duncan, his Cummington Press, Claire Van Vliet, a immigrant from Canada, worked mainly in America with her Janus Press. Here in Wisconsin, Wilbur Hamady and his Parachute Press. All of these printers trained literally hundreds of fine press printers working in the United States today. From the very fine, large fine press publishers such as the Arian Press of Andrew Hoyam, who trained worked with the Grabhorns, and the Penny Royal Press of Barry Moser, who trained with Leonard Baskin, to a plethora of small presses active in every state in the country. In Wisconsin, long a center of arts education, several fine press printers were active in the state today. People like Gaylord Shanley, to such Walter Haven trained printers as Milwaukee-born Verrocco artist Michael Capa, Racine-based letterpress printer Karen Heft, and Jeffrey Morin, who's the current president of MIAD. With a vibrant fine press tradition still flourishing today, perhaps not too surprising that we have these presses here. But this tradition is confined to the small press deluxe book intended for a discriminating collector. It's in the realm of mainstream commercial publishing and printing, however, that the legacy of the fine press movement has its broadest impact. Many traditional publishers immediately embraced the aesthetics of the fine press movement, like London publisher J.M. Dent, which I brought along and back and see this book, that very thing. And I've already mentioned that many designers trained in the early fine press tradition began doing work for major international publishers, which also employed the services of fine printers. Harper Brothers, Alfred A. Knopf, John Day, even New Directions in its Poet of the Year pamphlet series. This one is designed by the noted German-American type designer and fine press printer Victor Hammer, and handset and printed at Wells College Press, where Hammer was a faculty member, by his son Jakob Hammer in 1942. The arts and crafts calligrapher Edward Johnston, who designed the famous font for the London Underground, trained an enormous number of calligraphers and type designers. And I can only just name a few, but there are dozens of them. Florence Kingford, Brayley Hewitt, Eric Gill, Anna Simons, other major European type designers such as Rudolf Koch, and through him, such designers as Hermann Zapf were deeply inspired by the fine press movement. These designers became the rock stars of the 20th century typography, creating all the innovative fonts published by the major international foundries like Monotype, Linotype, the American type founders, Bauer and Enschede, Klingsport. All the typefaces we use in our word processing programs today are a legacy of the fine press movement. The very fact that we teach typography and graphic design in our universities and colleges today is a legacy of the fine press movement. The legacy touches our lives almost every day, and we are completely unaware of it. Let me just offer 3 examples. Penguin Books, that ubiquitous paperback publisher with that remarkably consistent design, that uniform design that lasted for almost 90 years and is now one of the big 5 publishers in the world. That uniformity was established by German designer Jan Schischold, who, although associate of Maine Bauhaus, was a major student of Walter Thielmann. Walter Thielmann is the co-founder of Janus Press, a part of the German fine press. Times New Roman, go-to font that we all use on our computers. It was designed by this fellow. The Edward Johnston acolyte Stanley Morrison for the Times of London, and he was a major figure in the Monotype operation. Even that ubiquitous typeface Helvetica, seen everywhere, from advertisements to subway signage to government notices to corporate logos, is the ultimate manifestation of a theoretical maxim devised by Beatrice Ward that, quote, type should be invisible. Ward, another major figure in Monotype Corporation, Corporation, was married to the fine press designer Frederick Ward, and was the longtime companion of Stanley Morrison. So I'm going to end my talk with an anecdote about Harry Potter. So back in the day, when Harry Potter was first coming out in various volumes, my kids were really young, and if they wanted to get like the first copies of the next book in the series, you'd have to pre-order it, and they would only release it at midnight on a school day. Of course, you know, most kids would not be there at midnight on a school day. So one time I ended up drawing the short straw, and was there with all these other parents at Harry Schwartz Bookshop when that still existed in Milwaukee, Shorewood, and right there, it was midnight, and I got in line with all these other parents who just wanted to go home, and we all shuffled up to grab to get our copy of Harry Potter and the Something, which Harry Potter was. And you know, I'm surprised that I actually never looked at Harry Potter, and I've never read Harry Potter. My kids tell me about the story, and they would read to me, and I'm a little ashamed that I never actually, looked inside the book. But when I got my book, thank you very much, I walked away and I just randomly opened it to a page spread, and it just happened to be a page spread. It's Harry Potter, sorry. This is the title page for, can't remember, Order of the Phoenix, right? But this is what I saw, and I was just flabbergasted. I mean, the first thing that came to mind was, who designed this type? Look at all these typefaces. I mean, just reading this in this typeface just is kind of elicited the sense of Hogwarts, and I immediately went to the back of the book to find the colophon. Colophon. The colophon is another revival by William Morris of something that used to be a feature in books before the 15th century. It's information about the making of a book. Now, all fine presses have colophons in them to this day. But why would I think that Harry Potter would have a colophon? Yeah, well, I said it was instinctual. I just immediately went to it, and there it was. Lo and behold, there it was in all this diamond-shaped typographic glory, just as it has been since William Morris reintroduced it. And here I learned that the typeface is 11.5 Adobe Garamond. Of course, it's Adobe Garamond. Redrawn by the very noted Adobe font designer Robert Slimbach in 1989. Typeset by another noted compositor, Brad Walrod. The colophon also tells me where it was printed, various directors and editors are, and but it doesn't tell me the most important thing: who designed the typeface used in the headers and the footers and the chapter heads back, and the page numbers. I mean, this typeface is now famous, and it didn't have that information. I had to look at it later. I later learned that typeface is called Able, and it was designed by another well-known type designer. Again, who comes, you can trace the lineage right back to the early fine press movement. Marcus Burlisle. He designed this in 1997, and the text, also uses a number of other, just dozens of other typefaces. And I learned those too. It includes like Shipwreck, Bold, Frankfurter Inline, Flemish Script, Brimley Dollhouse, one of my favorite typefaces for display, and P22 Da Vinci Forward. The Able typeface, which had hardly been used at all before Harry Potter, is now so closely associated with the series that it has a hard time finding a life beyond it. The Monotype Corporation's website, YFonts. How many of you have been on YFonts? 2 people. YFonts notes that while it's great that the type font is now famous, quote, popularity can also cripple a decorative face. It's always being recognized as the Harry Potter font. You might just have to wait a few decades for the Potter phenomenon to subside, to be freed from the chamber of pigeonholed fonts. But of course, this beautiful typographic colophon just brings to mind all the beautiful typographic colophons of the contemporary fine press movement. This one from a book by Lynn Baskin. But of course, that harkens back to all the shaped typography and the colophons of the earliest books in the fine press movement, which of course is only an echo of books from the 15th century with their shaped typography and colophons as well. This book is also on display outside. This is the Hypneris Machina. I know it's a mouthful. Hypneris Machina Polyphily, printed in 1499 in Venice by Aldus Manutius, with these hundreds of beautiful, well done woodcuts. And this is the third typeface. Well, all this was designed by Francesco Grifo. And so now we've come full circle. What is old is now entirely new again, with echoes from the past. And that is the legacy of the fine press movement. Thank you very much. Yes. Did you have something to say about that?
No, I was just gonna say, if you have any questions.
Go ahead.
What is out there in terms of like the print blocks from the fine press movement? Are there any print blocks that have survived? Are they in special collection? Where are they?
Yeah, they have survived. There are lots of different places in the world, mainly in England. I mean, I don't know about the American materials, but the British ones, they've had propensity for preserving these very consciously. The St. Bright Museum in London has a lot of typefaces and woodcuts. You were telling me that you went to the Red House in London, which was William Morris's one of William Morris's residences. And apparently, they have original prints and blocks and things like this too. So they are preserved in different places and libraries. I'm sure that the British Museum and the British Library have blocks, but I don't know that really for sure. I can't imagine it wouldn't be there in Oxford. But yeah, they survived. They definitely survived. And certainly survived a lot of pages, a lot of, like, if you go to the Morgan Library, I went to the Morgan Library in 1996. Yeah, because it was the anniversary of the printing of the Kelmscott Press in 1896. And they had all these original designs, hand-done designs by William Morris that they owned. And then there was this, William Morris has this famous border design. And I always thought, but that's an original wood engraving by Edward Jones. The border design is a woodcut that was designed by William Morris, cut by somebody else. And I thought it was printed with wood. And I'm looking at this image, it's an off print. And it's got the original wood engraving pasted in. And the design is all blue. And I couldn't say that it was printed in blue. It was actually his handbook. So that concept is preserved. And then I learned that it wasn't printed with wood type, with the original wood cut. It was printed, it was a metal plate was made of that and was printed with metal. So he wasn't averse to using modern technologies. I mean, after all, he was using an Albion hand press, iron hand press, which was late 18th, early 19th century invention. So he wasn't averse to this, but he was trying to find a way of incorporating craft back into the world of making books. What other questions?
What was William Morris's background that made him want to kind of have like a counter reaction to the mass market?
What was his background? Boy, I can't tell you exactly what his background is, but I can tell you that he was part of the pre-Raphaelite movement, and that interest in looking at things pre-Raphael, and things in the early Renaissance, and the late medieval period. And there was a whole cadre of individuals that were interested in pre-Raphaelite, making pre-Raphaelite production, their imagination, what that might be like. But he was a designer. I mean, that's what he was trained to do, that's what he became. And he made his, his money on wallpaper, essentially. And it really wasn't until late in his life, until 1888, that he went, there was an arts and crafts exposition. And in that arts and crafts exposition, Emery Walker was giving a lecture on the early typefaces of the Renaissance. And he was showing his magic lantern slides. And really huge images of Nicholas Jensen's typefaces. And it just really struck him. I mean, Morris had also been a writer and a publisher, and a very successful writer. He had a lot of his works published by the Chiswick Press in particular, even though Chiswick Press was using industrialized print equipment. They were still using really fine design, but it wasn't, what he wanted. I think there was even at that point where he thought, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to do design. I'm going to stop, having my stuff published because nothing is published the way I want it to be published. And he saw these things in 1888. And there's a legend of him and Emery Walker walking arm in arm down the Thames. And he turns to him and says, let's make us a font of type. And then 3 years later, there was. And that's really all I know. Then that's just what he focused on was the Kelmscott Press and the production of materials until he died in 1896. The press didn't close in 1896. They still had all this stuff that they wanted to be, that needed to be printed. So it closed 2 years later in 1898. And that book, the 1898 printing of the note by William Morris of his aims, is on the back to you over here. What other questions do you have? Yes, Sarah.
Do you know roughly how many books the Kelmscott Press produced? Cause such a short amount of time.
Yeah, they produced a lot of books.
Yeah.
A lot of time. It's really remarkable, and they had a lot of problems with the type and setting up the design of the major book he wanted to come out first was the Kelmscott Chaucer. And so he designed a Chaucer typeface almost immediately, after the golden typeface, and it took years for it to be accomplished until 1896. I don't know exactly how many there are, but that book, William Morris has an entire bibliography to count them.
I guess to me, it's interesting that they were active for such a short amount of time, but obviously it's this profound impact, and kind of like who carried that on, and is it like Emery Walker Phelps Press?
Yeah, so like I said, it's a circle of people, I mean, enormous circle of people. I just mentioned a handful who carried on the design principles. None of them look like, very few of them look like Kelmscott Press books. You can see that the Dove's Press had this very modern Roman typeface, really classical and beautiful. And they all printed until just before the war took place. And some of them reopened, Ashley closed for the war and then reopened again, for instance, and then continued on to like 1940. But then that inspired all these other people. They're like, look at that, you can do that. I mean, right away, commercial presses were printing both in America and in England and in Europe. They were doing these industrialized versions of William Morris's ideas. And I brought a book that demonstrates that, the JM Demo. Does that answer that? What else would you like to know? Yes.
The Venetians, can you talk a little bit about why printing started or in Venice and how that kind of, I mean, I realize it's a big topic, but why Venice?
I'll give you a
Okay.
condensed answer. It didn't start in Venice, so it started in Germany. It started in Mainz, and remained in Germany until the late 1460s. But why do you think Venice would be a place that people would go to? Because it's the center of commerce in all of Europe. So if you're a printer and you want people coming in from all over the world and ship things right from there to all over the world, you're going to go to Venice. So the first printers in Venice were the Spear brothers. They were from Speyer, Germany. Wendell and Hans de Speer, and they founded their press in 1468. Jensen works in their shop, and so do other, Banff and Colonia, all these people become major printers in the beginning. started opening these presses. They started working for the Spear Brothers and they go, we could do this. And they started opening their presses and they're commercially very viable. And everybody wants to jump on the bandwagon, and that's why Venice. And Venice remains a center for printing, at least another, let's say 30 years. Then it kind of moves to Lyon and Paris, and it was by the end of the 16th century, northern France and Netherlands and places like Antwerp, which is now in Belgium, become major centers, remain the major centers right to the 18th century. So that is the condensed history of printing in Europe. That is your question? Yeah.
I can't remember his name, but wasn't in Venice. Wasn't a printer, he was a calligrapher and produced hundreds of books. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was an Italian. Did a lot of calligraphy and kind of put him out of business, I guess. The printing press came along, but I cannot remember his name.
I mean, there were famous calligraphers that type designs were based on their hands, particularly the various italic fonts. The very first italic font by Francesco Grifo for Altus Minucius, was produced in 1501, was based on a particular hand by a noted papal chancery calligrapher. Maybe you're thinking of Ludovico Origi.
Yes.
Yeah, Ludovico Origi wasn't put out of business really. He was one of those chancery people in Rome, and he invented a beautiful sloping italic face based on his own hand, and then he became a printer, which is why I'd say he didn't really put it out of business. He went into business. Yeah, I can, if I do this by hand, I can, and people love my handwriting. I can just make a type font out of this and print it up. That's what happened. And then Origi, that typeface was noted, but it really wasn't well used necessarily because it was his typeface. So I don't know if anybody wanted or anything, but it was revived and as part of the fine press movement in the 20th century, designed by Origi. Frederick Ward? No. Bruce Rogers and Frederick Ward. I don't know which one it was, but one designed Centaur, and then they needed a sloping face, and so they redesigned Origi, and that's why you always see Centaur typeface with Q typeface together. Other questions? Okay, we'll one in the back, and then you want to have questions. Okay, first you guys.
This is William Morrison, the socialist.
Yeah, isn't that ironic? You're making these beautiful sumptuous books that are way beyond pricing that any proletarian reader can afford. Right?
Yeah, did you see that? And his work does not get expressed in his work, and then you see that like through the community on conference.
And in some aspects of it, notes from nowhere, it's called, does express that. And he tried to produce fine press books in small formats for the average reader. I still think, the average reader would look at this and kind of, this is unreadable, and that was one of the criticisms of Kelmscott Press, is that he, in his, you can read it in his aims, he wanted to make a typeface and print on the page so that it reads beautifully and you wouldn't be bothered by the type and so on, but certainly didn't do that. He thinks he did, but I think they weren't very popular. The proletariat, sincerely. But so does that answer your question? Or is it, what was your question?
Who do they sell these books to?
Sorry?
Who do they sell these books to? So starting in
Oh,
the Venetians, I assume merchants, and then who were their clients?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Like, how did he sell his books? I'm selling it in bookstores. I mean, I know that Longman's Green, publisher of a bookstore, is very interested in, they may have distributed his books, but I don't know the answer to that question. Now, that's another line of inquiry that I'm going to have to follow. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. You keep me going on this rabbit hole.
I guess following up on that question, I was thinking about a British studio, the man who created the British studio pottery movement, Bernard Leach. And I remember reading a letter about how some woman wrote to him and said, you know, I got one of your teapots and it's horrible. The spout does not pour and it just drips everywhere on the table. And Leach was horrified that somebody had actually used this teapot to make tea in.
Right.
And
It doesn't work, but isn't it beautiful? Right.
but along with the question of, you know, who was the client for this is, what's the experience of reading this? Who read these books? How do you read this book? I went looking at the book on the history of paper making. It's like, you need a days for it just to go through it.
Right.
And you said that some of these aren't all that legible, all that real.
Well, just the Kelmscott Press was considered not as legible as it should be. I mean, the other presses had much better type fonts, or at least more readable type fonts than the general public.
Who read these, and what is the experience of reading a book that is so aesthetically florid?
Right. So,
And I just wanted to make a quick comment too, where like some of the pages aren't even cut in these books, so it's like you're not even reading it because the folding of the binding and all that, like.
not uncut, unopened.
Unopened.
So, well, that's the way all books were produced.
You, the
The
reader.
reader would have to open them. And a lot of the books that we have in libraries are already opened, so they're never read. They were just beautiful objects. So, you know, what's the experience? And who got these? I said in my talk that it was the discriminating collector. You know, those who wanted that feel, that sumptuousness. It's not about reading text, it's about reading the book. I mean, that's really what the book arts movement is about. It's like using the book for what it already says. And what it says is this: it turns, it sounds, it feels. And when you read these books, try reading them. I mean, I can read them. Your face, this is the way I feel when I read them. My eyes just like kind of sink into that page because of the impression of that type of paper, particularly in Kelmscott Press books, which are done with this really black ink. I mean, the ink that he mixed his own inks, and he insisted on this particular formula for his inks, and it was black and gummy, you know, and his pressmen hated it. They just hated working with it because it was so hard to print with it, just gum up everything. But that's why you get the blackness in Kelmscott books. So that feeling of, you know, being absorbed into the page is what that feels like. Who would want this? The person who would want that kind of experience, the person who's really interested in that finely crafted object. That's all I can say. Do I have evidence of this? No, that's what I think. And I think this because that's the motivation of these fine press printers. They continue to be the motivation for fine print printers today. I mean, who buys Galen Shadow's books, really? You know, I mean, he's a very much sought after wood engraver and letterpress printer. Do you have one in your home? No. You know, the Barry Moser's 2-volume Bible, the first Bible hand printed, and probably the first Bible hand printed since the 18th century, but first Bible fully illustrated by one artist with original prints since Gustave Doré in 1850. It was probably the last fine press printed book in the second millennium, because it was printed at the end of 1999. I guess millennium really ends in 2000. But and when you read that book, that's exactly how it feels. So the type is Galliard type, redesigned by Matthew Carter. Matthew Carter's a genius. I mean, he's a certified genius because he received the MacArthur Genius Award. Typographers receiving MacArthur Genius Awards. I mean, this would never happen in the 19th century or more before. You know, why? Because of the fine press movement. And when you read that type font on that particular handmade paper with that ink in this large format, you don't care. You're just absorbed in that text, and it makes you float through it. So that Bible was issued also as a trade publication by Viking Press. Came out at the same time, October 1999. And there's no comparison. It's just a reproduction essentially, typeface, but it's smaller format. And it has none of that feel whatsoever. And it's almost really kind of uninteresting to read. You really want to get absorbed, you really feel like you want to read the limited edition version of the Moses Bible, because it's what it does to you. Books, this has always been true. Books make you think a very particular way. Most people don't realize this. All media, all communication media frames a way of thinking. And we think the way we think because of the various technologies of communication that we engage in daily. Handheld phones, handheld devices, have engender a very particular way of thinking. And I've tracked it. I can see the changes that happen in human interactions. Just a way of being because of that change of technology. Same thing is true of books. So when fine press printing hit the market, so to speak, and then it was absorbed by commercial presses, it altered a way of thinking about the book. It also altered a way of reading the book too. That's a long-winded question. The answer to your question, sorry. What other questions here? Yes.
Do you see a difference in the assignments your students turn in?
Do I see any difference?
I mean, from this kind of engagement with a book, now technology, and they would be looking at that on their little phone or laptop, writing a paper for you, turn it in. Do you see any difference between the students who interact with the actual item as opposed to the ones who just are all about technology or related to viewing it in that way?
I do, because they have to. So I'm not sure how to separate that from what I teach. They have to look at books, they have to write about it.
Maybe over time.
So over time,
I mean, there's so much less technology in the 90s than now when you started working. I'm just trying to put myself back when I was doing my undergrad, computers were just starting.
Right.
And I was interacting with art history, illuminated manuscripts in a way that's different now. I can just go to a website and look at it.
well, I don't think it changed the content, it just changes the process. Does it change the way you think? It does change the way you think about the physical aspects of producing paper. I mean, I'm older than you, so I was writing, handwriting some of my papers back in the early 70s, and then using a typewriter into the late 70s. I didn't use computers until early 1980s. So one of the reasons I actually went into this profession was to get involved in the use of digital communications as a storage and retrieval mechanism. What I find is the way they learn is different. Maybe that's a better way. The way they produce papers, maybe not so much, because every cohort is different and every student is different. So one of the things I noticed, I'm not sure if this has anything to do with communication tools, is that somehow the education doesn't seem to be as robust as in my day. The kind of reading that I give my students is the kind of reading I get gotten as undergraduate students. And I work with graduate students. My graduate students say, this is overwhelming. This is so much reading. Really? This is what I would take 3 classes at a time. So at this level of reading in all 3 classes. This is something they're just not used to. The other thing that changes a lot, and it is technological, is what they absorb and what they retain and what they remember. The digital environment is a scroll environment. The book environment is a landscape environment. So that when you're accessing content in a landscape environment, your mind is automatically, without even thinking about it, because it makes you think of it a certain way, is automatically mapping the book. So when if you're reading a novel, let's say, and you come across a character at the very beginning, and then that character disappears for a while, and then the character reappears at the end of the book, and you go, I remember coming across that character. It was, over here, toward the beginning of the book. I remember it was in the bottom right-hand side, right? We do this all the time with our books. Can't do that in scroll space. It's like, yeah, I remember that character, but where the hell is that? Right? So what happens is it makes it more difficult to retain content in memory. While the book environment is more amenable to doing that. It's different. I mean, it's not worse. Well, it is worse if you can't remember things. And I find that my students are not as able to remember, keep things in memory as I would have done, or the students in the book environment would have done. So that's a change, I think. You know, and things like COVID really changed things. So, you know, my students are still recovering from COVID. They're all on edge all the time. When's the next shoe gonna drop? And that's a complete change. That's a much more, you know, evident change to me than use of digital communication. Really fascinates me. Is like I've been watching these students over the course of, you know, over 12 years as teaching this course, and you know, at the beginning of the course, it's long. It's like teach it at night and it's long, and everybody gets tired. And you know, in the middle, I give them a break, go off and go to the restroom, and they make a phone call. They go out and smoke a cigarette, whatever, and they come back, and then they sit circle lounge area, and the first, you know, back in 2009 or 8 when I first started teaching this history books and printing. I taught other courses before that. They would sit around and they would talk to each other, right? And then as handheld devices became more prevalent, some would be talking, but others would be really absorbed in that space. And now, but they hardly ever talk to each other, except when they get to know each other. And sometimes they do. Mainly, sometimes it's worse. It's a different kind of engagement, and also there's permission. I mean, you know, when you're, you know, it used to be back in the day, it used to be rude to, you know, be on your phone while somebody's talking. Now there's permission is given. It's acceptable because this is what we do. This is how we think. This is what I mean by the communication tools that we engage on a daily basis frames a way of thinking. It offers us a different way of thinking. Another long-winded answer to a question. Sorry. I should say sorry. That's what you get. For asking me that kind of question. Because I can, you know, I can talk about this forever. Any other questions? I mean, sure, I should say what other questions. By saying any other questions, you won't ask me a question. What other questions you have? Go ahead.
I was gonna ask, when they started printing these, is it all classics that they started printing? Is it new books?
In
When they would do the fine press?
the fine press movement?
Yeah.
No, it was actually mainly not always, but mainly new texts. So particularly in the arts and crafts movement, they were printing things that the arts and crafts people were writing. So, you know, Morris is printing his own stuff, he's printing stuff with his friends and so on. I'm trying to think of, he loved printing Ruskin, because Ruskin was somebody just before him in the arts and crafts. Classics. Okay, Fairy Queen. The Fairy Queen was, they all printed Fairy Queen. And they all printed, not all, many of them printed the Rubaiyat of Mark Khayyam, because that's like the second most printed book beside the Bible for some reason. And it also offers, you know, a way of using design to really elevate this, particularly Fitzgerald's translation of Rubaiyat. So yeah, those kinds of things, but those were texts that were of interest to pre-Raphaelites in the arts and crafts movement, things like that. Blake was also printed a lot because he was kind of like the previous centuries, you know, fine press kind of guy, and there were press and that. So those sorts of things. But it began to move way more toward and then contemporary writers. So Golden Cockerel Press mainly has, you know, a lot of contemporary writers. It's the second wave of fine press printing. None Such Press. I mean, they were printing. Yeah, they were printing. What is a classic? Were they printing like Romans and Greek stuff? Generally not, but they were printing Milton, particularly Paradise Lost. I think everybody printed Paradise. Everybody printed a Bible. Not everybody, but most of them. That kind of stuff. But I think the interest is really in publishing and printing their friends, and printing their friends in a beautiful manner. Yes.
Is there any kind of ratio for fiction to nonfiction?
Nonfiction. mainly fiction, a lot of poetry, fiction. You know, News from Nowhere is an essay. Trying to think of good examples. Plays, I think mainly fiction. I'm trying to think of the work of all these presses. I can only think of a handful of nonfiction things. It's mainly fiction and poetry. And plays. What else? All right, thank you so much for your attention. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. If you have time to hang around, you can please, you're more than welcome to view the items that we have out here for you. Ask more questions of Max or Sarah or myself. Thank you for your patience and grace, those of our friends who are still with us, I hope, live streaming. I didn't realize that it started right at 1:30 and we didn't begin until later, so thank you for sitting tight. I do think I forgot to mention, we are in the Richard E. and Lucile Krug Rare Books room, and this is the Richard E. and Lucile Krug Rare Books lecture. Thank you, Max Yela, for being here with us for our spring 2024 lecture. We do already have our fall 2024 lecture scheduled. This is a hopefully biannually event that we're going to have. That should be, I believe, Saturday, November 2nd, with Lois Quinn about the WPA handicraft project. So that was an exhibit done in the 90s at UWM between Lois Quinn and Mary Kellogg Rice, who was the artistic director for the WPA handicraft project. So please do follow us on social media, sign up for our mailing list, and we'll keep you informed about that as it's coming up. And I can't believe I forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, Amy Tan is also coming next month already. So that event will be in Centennial Hall, and we will be bringing some of our natural history materials from the Rare Books collection to the Lose Room in the Centennial Hall complex. So please do come visit us for that. I believe it is, I have to look at my calendar, Thursday, June. Oh no. I don't know. I think it's the 13th. I think it is. Okay. Yes, I believe it is. But again, if you follow us on social media or sign up for our mailing list, we'll give you those correct details. Thank you again so much, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Max. We so very much appreciate you being here. And thank you to Sarah for putting in all the hard work to curate our amazing displays, all our exterior displays and our behind the glass displays. Yeah, pretty much everything that's behind the glass right now is Sarah. So please do spend some time with those.
This is my third.
It's